Alright, a bit of a different video today. Some days ago I asked you all to send me some Genshin related questions but also personal questions in a community post, and today I will answer them, or at least the most interesting one, I guess. The first one is actually coming from Twitter and it's a bit of a tough one. Your top 5 most powerful teams in Genshin Impact in terms of meta. There are actually two different answers to this, one pertaining to the speedrun meta and one pertaining to the regular meta. The speedrun meta is quite vague because it usually depends on what the opponent's DPS are at a given time, because specific opponents will benefit specific characters. There are a few staple characters that have incredibly strong constellations, but the teams are ever changing because they will change depending on what the players need to clear the fastest. On the other hand, the regular players meta is much more set in stone because it's not about clearing the fastest, but it's about which teams are more consistent. Regular players are not likely to invest on many characters to make them all reach their ceiling, but they're more likely to invest on very specific characters and to always focus on specific teams. So basically, most of the time they don't have the freedom to choose who fits a specific abyss lineup the best between many characters. If we're talking meta investment for the regular players, so endgame type of investment, these are the 5 teams I will choose. Man, I'm going to make some enemies with this one. I will pick 2 Dendro type teams, one being Nilu Bloom and the other being all the teams based around Alhaitham. Nilu Bloom is kinda obvious because it's a team that will never disappoint you in any AoE scenarios. Pretty easy team to make as well, because from a meta standpoint, the only characters you really need here are Nahida and of course Nilu. The Alhaitham teams are probably going to sound more interesting, but I think as a Quicken or Quick Bloom or Hyper Bloom pick is the most reliable choice in general. At Constellation 0 investment, I prefer his Quicken teams over Tignari Quicken teams because I think he has better AoE and just feels a bit better in general. And of course you have the pretty meta Quick Bloom teams with Alhaitham, Nahida, an Electro option and a Hydro option, which I actually prefer over the Hyper Bloom options with only Nahida and 2 Hydro characters. The reason is just that with Alhaitham variants you have more investment scaling damage and more AoE. So basically, if your Alhaitham is well invested with a 5-star weapon and maybe some constellations, you will feel it. But yeah, in general I would say that the Alhaitham Nahida core makes the top 5 team list. Then I would probably say Hu Tao for single target content, like the double Hydro variants, but also the Hyper variants with Bennett. Some people like to argue that Hu Tao fell off because Hyperbloom free-to-play teams power crept her, but at Constellation 1 home investment for Hu Tao, which I believe to be pretty common between Hu Tao mains, the reality is that Hu Tao is still pretty top tier from a single target standpoint. Note that I'm not saying Hu Tao is strictly good in single target content, but she's just top tier there and not top tier in more AoE content. On the other hand, new vignette teams, which are the 4th team archetype in this list, are pretty exceptional in any AoE content. The main thing that makes these teams good is how easy new vignette is to use. While it is on field, for the most part you can just spam left click and it will unleash absolute hell on opponents. And then there are animation cancels, which will make you save some seconds in the rotation and are pretty easy to learn. The fact is, it has a certain DPS ceiling that is incredibly easy to reach, and this fact alone is extremely great. If on top of this you add the fact he has probably the best AoE in the game, then you get one of the best teams archetype in the game in my opinion. Last but not least, the Anemo teams that are based around Ferozan Constellation 6, be it those with Wanderer carry or Shao carry. These are teams that are both incredibly consistent and have high damage ceiling. They're teams that function incredibly smoothly both in single target content and AoE content. And the only negative is probably that if you don't have Ferozan's Constellation 6, the team archetype will probably feel completely different from a damage standpoint and as such from a playstyle standpoint. You could argue teams like International or Ayaka Freeds or whatever could make this list, but this is my subjective list, I guess. These are my 5 best teams, and if you disagree, then attack me in the comments. Oh, this one's interesting. What advice would you give to someone wanting to learn more about theory crafting? Excluding the obvious, so learning the basics from sites like Kaching Main Library, which contains a huge portion of what you need to know in the game at a basic level, the advice I will give to people that want to start learning about theory crafting and also other theory crafters is that you should not fixate on getting the highest DPS numbers on shit that much. Or rather, you should not let that number dictate what you think about that character massively. In my opinion, one of the objectives about theory crafting is finding out how good a character can be in practical scenarios, and by practical scenarios, I don't necessarily mean easy rotations. Fixed rotations are almost never applicable in practical scenarios, so the thing you need to figure out is how much DPS you will lose over slight variations of that rotation. The best characters, in my opinion, are the ones that don't have that many rotations constraints, I guess. So they won't lose much damage from changing the rotations on the fly. This is the case for Dendro teams, for example. They're teams that don't have that many limitations from an elemental reaction perspective and also rotation perspective. And they happen to be some of the best teams in the game, because they are the most consistent. So my suggestion is try to focus less on numbers and try to visualize more how that team would play out in practice. Next we have, is Ganyu being underestimated for her strength currently, or are people finding her playstyle so boring they feel she's less powerful than people say she is? The thing about Ganyu is that she never had the highest DPS. Both her Freeze teams and Melt teams peak at 50,000 DPS, which is kinda average. Back in the day, the thing that made her so good, so overpowered, was the fact you could combine her strong AoE with incredible stun locking potential through Freeze. On top of that, Venti was much more usable, and this grouping made the AoE Ganyu could unleash, and also obviously the Freeze, much more efficient, and the team as a whole much stronger. Now not only you have many teams that can make Ganyu's team DPS look shameful in comparison, but she also lost this comfort pick that she had in Venti for the most part. So her teams got a bit worse and other teams got much better, and the result is Ganyu feeling weaker today. What do you think Navia and Chiori have to do kit-wise to make Geo meta? It's not really about what they have to do kit-wise, but rather how flexible they would be in terms of team construction. Current Geo teams are kinda inflexible, since Ito needs a lot of buttering and Goro specifically benefits more Geo characters in the team rather than other types of characters. If a new Geo character could create an environment where you don't need many other Geo characters around him, then the situation will be much more promising, since that would mean you could slot in high value characters like Furina much more easily and the team will benefit. What's your opinion that Bennett, Shincho and some other 1.0 4-star are still meta relevant to this day? Do you think it was ultimately a good thing that they ended up being so powerful? Overall, I think it was a good thing for the game, of course, to have these easily obtainable 4-stars being so good, so strong. Funnily enough, I think MiHoYo has a different opinion on this, since these 4-stars have some mechanics that are not in the game anymore, like they're not introducing these mechanics on new characters anymore. Things like snapshotting or incredibly peculiar internal cooldown mechanics, they're not on characters anymore. Most characters have standard cooldown mechanics and no snapshot. They probably realize that in the long term these mechanics could be game breaking because they're not easy to manage from a game balancing standpoint. I think it's good that they're starting to kinda replace these 4-stars, because while it's great that free-to-play options are exceptional, I think it's good to have some variety from a game diversity standpoint. And for the same reason, it's great to have some 4-stars we previously believed to be weak become meta with new changes. That is great for the meta of the game. In general, Genshin is not a hardcore game, so the more diverse it is, the better, the fun. Ignoring meta and numbers and from a story standpoint, who are your favorite characters? So there are a lot of characters that I like, for example Dottore, obviously, since it is the icon of my channel. Then I like Raiden, which is a controversial character from a writing standpoint, because many feel the Inazuma questline as a whole felt too dull, too dumb, and the full thing was resolved too easily, but I think she was a proper take at a distant god. Like, gods are not supposed to be like humans, they're supposed to feel different, to not feel the same emotions and not think in the same way. They must feel like they are superior beings, and so they probably shouldn't have much empathy for humans. This was more so the case for Raiden, because for thousands of years she's been a shadow to her sister, and after she died she put herself in isolation and basically never lived through these emotions humans feel. So I think what they did very well is showing that she lacked empathy, and that made a lot of sense to me. Then I'm really hyped for two characters that are yet to come out, and those are Barca and Capitano. I'm really hyped for them, and I will recklessly pull for them and maybe even cosplay them. Yeah, I love strong characters in lore, in stories, and those sound very overpowered and childlike, so they're characters that I want, definitely. Now let's look at some personal questions, since I'd like you to know about me more. And the first one is, what do you prefer more, tea or coffee? I literally cannot function without at least 2 coffees a day. Literally cannot function. Is YouTube enough to pay your bills? Or the channel is still more like a hobby? It is actually way more than enough. Not the base YouTube payment, which is not that big, but rather this partnership I have with this agency called Yomiholic. So as I was saying, this agency called Yomiholic that I'm affiliated with to make Genshin content, that pays me quite a bit, more than the YouTube payment. What first got you into Genshin, then meta-analysis, and do you have any plans to branching out from Genshin? Also, just for fun, how tall are you? Love your work. Thank you. The reason I got into Genshin is pretty normal. I'm a big anime fan, and Genshin just looked like the coolest anime game out there. Same for the meta-analysis thing, pretty normal. I just like to theorycraft, I like math in games, so I got into Genshin theorycrafting. Long term, I do plan to branch out from Genshin because this game won't last forever, and if I want my YouTube to outlast Genshin, I have to make plans for the future, which I don't have yet. But I think I could adapt to different topics, many different topics, so I'll have to pick one. I will probably just have to ride the hype for something. Probably shouldn't say this out loud though. And I'm 6 feet tall, and somebody in the comments a long time ago called me a short king. I'm no Ziox, my friend. I'm 6 feet tall. Was there a point where you felt like you had made it, or become a noticeably bigger name in the Genshin content creator space? If not, what do you imagine that milestone look like in your head? Very interesting question, thank you. I don't feel like I have made it yet. In the big picture of content creation, like compared to the truly big channels, my channel is just a small fish. But I do feel like I'm becoming an increasingly relevant presence in the Genshin theorycrafting picture, which is nice. And I started feeling like I achieved this in the scene of Genshin creation when I started feeling pressure about what I said in videos. It's one thing to make content that only a few hundreds of people will see, and it's a whole another deal to make content that potentially 100,000 people will see, because in the second scenario, you're just influencing a lot more people. Once I realized that the second scenario was becoming more consistent, I started being more cautious about what I say, because there is a real weight to my words and I have to deal with it. What is your sexual orientation? And this other dude answered, if I were to guess, he's probably straight or asexual. He might be bi, but I honestly don't see it. Why asexual? I'm straight, by the way, I'm straight. But why asexual? Why did you think this? Will you open an OnlyFans? Asking for myself. Honest guy, no, never. Never say never though. What would it take for you to theorycraft Star Rail? A gun pointed to my head and my whole family kidnapped. Just kidding, of course, just like how you phrased the question, but I don't see myself theorycrafting Star Rail because I don't play the game that much, so I won't theorycraft what I don't play. I already received hints about it, but I need confirmation. Are you Italian? I probably answered this exact question 1,000 times under my videos, but yeah, I'm Italian. Sono italiano. And trust me, I'm a lot smarter in Italian. Personal question, are you single? Yeah, I'm single, and it might shock you, but being a Genshin YouTuber won't get you any luckier with ladies, so if that's your objective, go be a footballer or something, I don't know. I have 2 questions. What is the most unhinged comment you received on one of your videos, and what is your reaction to people being really down bad for you in the comment section? The most unhinged comment is probably somebody telling me I'm the most breathable person, Theorycrafter, in the Genshin community, which was weird. I guess it's a compliment, but still weird. Regarding my reactions to such comments, in a way they're compliments, so I'm flattered, but I kinda don't care that much. I don't really care a lot about what is said on the internet, and this goes for positive comments as well as negative comments. It's an approach I constantly have. Honestly though, I really didn't expect these many reactions. It's not like I'm not confident about myself, but more like I just didn't expect the reactions to be so egregious. Do you like anime? If so, what's your top 3? Okay, so let's change this question to my favorite movie and series, both in terms of animated products and not animated products, because I can. So in terms of animated products, my favorite movie is Princess Kaguya by Ghibli. This movie is quite simple in terms of plot, but what's so fascinating about it is how it can make this simple story so compelling thanks to the art style, the animation, the music, and the whole rhythm of the movie. It just flows so well, despite being quite long for an animated movie, and it's just magical throughout, and it has a quite nice ending, although bittersweet ending. My favorite animated series is Arcane, so not a Japanese anime. I don't play League of Legends, so I went into this with no expectations whatsoever, no affection to the characters, but it is shockingly good, seriously shockingly good. Again, it doesn't have a very complex plot, but it's quite coherent and every character is fleshed out well, but its biggest strength is the animation and art style. Literally every frame is spectacular and amazing to see. It's just so well directed as well, and every sequence is something you can remember. You can pick out from the show and say, oh, this is a 10/10. It's a series that really shows the potential of what you can do with animation as opposed to live action. There are things you can only do with animation, but only some shows do that, achieve that. And I really can't wait for the season 2 that is coming in 2024. My favorite movie is After Hours by Martin Scorsese. And this is probably a pretty unique pick and a pretty old movie, but it's just a favorite of mine. Honestly, pretty surreal movie that can look like it makes no sense for long stretches, but it will consistently entertain you and keep a steady flow. And it also has a pretty nice message that is quite subtle but meaningful. My favorite series is Succession, a series that has incredible acting, camera work, and dialogue. Again, it's not a movie with a very complex plot, but when every scene is so compelling thanks to the dialogue and acting, it doesn't need to have the most complex plot with the smartest plot twists. If every scene is great, then that's enough to me. So yeah, remember to check out my channel in the future for more movie and series reviews, I guess. So this is it. I had a lot of fun recording this because it felt more personal. So if you liked it, let me know in the comments below because I'll do more in the future.